I can fix it. How the hell did a homeless rat like you get in here? Someone who actually built your system need me here. Security, get this dog out. He's stinking up my event.
Landon didn't move.
Do you see this? This is absolutely pathetic.
Give me 2 minutes.
Let the bum try. What's the difference?
Victor's lead engineer whispered something. Victor's smile dropped.
Fine. Let the animal perform. When he fails, somebody call the pound.
He shoved a napkin across the table. Atlas. Victor Hale's billion-dollar AI crashed on launch day.
Is this a glitch?
Live. 12,000 people watching, every screen black. And Landon picked up the pen. No shaking, just steady hands. Nobody in that room knew. What he wrote on that napkin didn't just fix the system. It destroyed the man who stole it. 3 years before that napkin hit the table, Landon Archer was the most brilliant AI architect in San Francisco. Not the most famous, not the richest, the most brilliant. The difference mattered. He grew up in Hunters Point, the part of the city tourists never see. His mother cleaned office buildings downtown. His father left before Landon turned 3. There was no trust fund, no private school, no Silicon Valley connections. Just a kid who taught himself to code on a second-hand laptop with a cracked screen, sitting on the floor of a public library because the chairs were always taken. By 22, Landon had published a paper on recursive neural architecture that 3 Stanford professors called a decade ahead of its time. By 26, he had built a prototype for a self-learning AI framework, the Neural Bridge, in his studio apartment using hardware he bought from electronics recyclers. By 30, he had a name in the field, a small name, but the right people knew it. Victor Hale was one of those people. Victor came from the other San Francisco, Pacific Heights. His father ran a venture capital firm. His mother sat on the board of 2 tech companies. Victor went to Stanford, graduated with honors, and walked straight into a corner office his family connections built for him. He was smart, nobody denied that. But smart and brilliant are not the same thing. Victor knew how to sell, how to raise capital, how to shake the right hands at the right dinner parties. What he didn't know, what he never had, was the ability to build something from nothing. That's why he needed Landon. They met at a tech conference in 2019. Victor bought Landon a drink, called him a genius, told him his neural bridge prototype could change the world. "You build it," Victor said. "I'll fund it. 50-50. Landon believed him. They founded Meridian Systems together. Landon built the architecture. Victor built the brand. For 2 years, it worked. Landon stayed in the lab. Victor stayed in front of cameras. Meridian grew. Investors poured in. The Neural Bridge became Atlas. And Atlas became the most anticipated AI product in a generation. Then Victor decided 50-50 was too generous. It started small. Landon's name disappeared from press releases, then from investor presentations, then from internal documents. When Landon confronted him, Victor smiled and said, "Nobody invests in a guy from Hunters Point, Landon. They invest in a story. And the story is me." The board vote came on a Tuesday. Victor had spent 6 months quietly replacing board members with people loyal to him. The vote was 5-1. Landon was out. His equity, dissolved through a clause Victor's lawyers had buried in the original contract. His name, removed from every patent filing. Landon hired a lawyer. The lawyer took his savings and told him the case would take years. It took 8 months for Landon to go from a condo in Soma to a sleeping bag under the I-80 overpass. He kept one thing: a leather journal. Cracked spine, coffee-stained pages. Every algorithm, every notation, every version of the Neural Bridge, written by hand, in a system only Landon used. Archer loops. a recursive shorthand he invented at 19. No textbook taught it. No university recognized it. It existed in one place: that journal. And in the base code of every product Meridian Systems ever shipped. The woman who gave him the badge was named Nora Collins, Senior Systems Engineer. She had joined Meridian a year after Landon was pushed out, but she was good enough to read code, and what she read didn't match the story Victor told. The base layer of Atlas was full of a notation style nobody on the current team recognized. She traced it back. She found Landon's name in old archived files Victor thought he'd deleted. 2 days before launch, she found Landon outside a shelter on Folsom Street. She handed him a badge and said 5 words: "Atlas is going to fail." Landon looked at the badge, then at her. "Why do you care?" Nora didn't hesitate. "Because I'm an engineer, and engineers don't let thieves take credit for work they can't even understand." That was how a homeless man ended up standing in the Moscone Center on the biggest day in Meridian's history, watching the system he built crash on a stage that was never supposed to have his name on it. And Victor Hale had no idea who was standing in the back of his room. The Moscone Center lobby was a cathedral of money. Glass walls, white marble floors, banners 40 feet tall with Victor Hale's face next to the word Atlas in silver letters. Every seat filled. First 3 rows, investors, board members, tech journalists. Behind them, engineers, developers, influencers, all hand-picked to create the loudest applause Silicon Valley had ever recorded. Landon walked in through a side entrance. The badge Nora gave him said technical staff. Nobody looked twice. A black man in worn clothes holding a staff badge, most people assumed he was maintenance. One woman moved her handbag to the other side of her chair when he passed. He found a spot near the back wall, stood there, said nothing, watched. Victor Hale took the stage at exactly 10 a.m. The crowd gave him a standing ovation before he spoke a single word. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His hair was perfect. His teeth were perfect. Everything about him was designed to say one thing: "I belong here, and you should be grateful I'm letting you watch." "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, 3 years ago, I had a vision." Landon's jaw tightened. 3 years ago. The exact amount of time since Victor stole everything. Victor talked for 20 minutes. He talked about innovation, about courage, about building something the world had never seen. He used the word "I" 43 times. He used the word "team" twice. He never mentioned Landon Archer. Not once. Not even close. Then came the moment. "Let me show you," Victor said, "what happens when one man refuses to accept the impossible." He pressed a button on the podium. The massive screen behind him lit up. The Atlas logo spun. Music swelled through the speakers. And then, nothing. The logo froze. The screen flickered. A line of red error text scrolled across the bottom. Too fast for most people to read, but not too fast for Landon. He read every word, and he recognized exactly what was happening. The system was trying to execute a recursive function built on Archer loops, his notation, but someone had rewritten the routing layer on top of it. The two architectures were fighting each other. The old code wanted to go left. The new code was forcing it right. Atlas was tearing itself apart from the inside. Victor laughed nervously. "Technical difficulties. Give us 1 moment." 1 moment became 2 minutes. 2 minutes became 5. The screen went fully black. The music cut out. Engineers rushed backstage. The audience started whispering. Then the whispers got louder. Victor's chief technology officer, a man named Grant Whitfield, ran onto the stage and whispered in Victor's ear. Landon watched Victor's face change. The confidence melted. Underneath it, panic. Pure, cold panic. "We're experiencing a minor system conflict," Victor announced. "My team is resolving it now." But his team wasn't resolving it. Landon could see them through the glass panel backstage. 6 engineers hunched over laptops, typing, deleting, typing again. One of them threw his hands up. Another stepped away from his screen and put his face in his hands. They couldn't fix it because they didn't understand what they were looking at. The base code was Landon's. The notation was Landon's. The architecture was Landon's. And Victor had hired a team that had never seen Archer loops in their lives. 15 minutes passed. The audience grew restless. Investors started leaving. Phones came out, not to film the launch, but to call their financial advisors. A tech journalist in the second row tweeted, "Atlas launch is a disaster. System completely dead. Hale sweating on stage." That's when Landon stepped forward. He didn't push through the crowd. He walked calmly down the center aisle, every step deliberate. His boots barely held together. His jacket had a tear along the left shoulder. He hadn't shaved in weeks. He looked like exactly what Victor would later call him, a nobody. But Nora Collins, standing backstage with her arms crossed, saw him coming, and for the first time that morning, she exhaled. Landon reached the edge of the stage. A security guard stepped in front of him. "Sir, you can't." Landon held up his badge. "Technical staff." The guard looked at the badge, then at Landon, then at the badge again. He let him through. Landon walked up to Victor. The mic was still live. 12,000 people heard every word. "Your system crashed because your team overwrote the recursive routing layer without understanding the base architecture." Victor stared at him, not with curiosity, with disgust. "Who the hell let you on my stage?" "The same person who built the system you're failing to launch." Victor's face went red. He turned to security. "Get this man off my stage! Now!" But Grant Whitfield grabbed Victor's arm and pulled him aside. The mic caught fragments. "Nothing's working. We've tried everything. We have 30 minutes before investors pull out." Victor turned back to Landon. The disgust was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Desperation. The exchange that followed played out in front of 12,000 people and 4 live cameras. Victor spoke slowly, each word dripping with contempt. "You've got some nerve showing your face here. Look at you. You smell like the street. You look like something I'd scrape off my shoe. And you want to touch my system?" Landon didn't blink. "It was my system before you stole it." The crowd murmured. Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice, but the mic caught everything. "Listen to me carefully. I gave you a chance once. I pulled you out of whatever hole you came from, and you couldn't handle the pressure. That's not my fault. That's genetics." A ripple of uncomfortable silence moved through the audience. A few people shifted in their seats. Nobody stood up. Nobody said a word. Victor turned to the crowd and smiled. "Don't worry, folks. We'll have this sorted in minutes. We don't need charity cases to run a tech company." The crowd laughed, some nervously, some not. Landon stood on that stage, surrounded by people in $1,000 suits who wouldn't make eye contact with him, and waited. Landon stayed. He didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't defend himself. He just stood there, hands at his sides, and waited for Victor to run out of options. It took exactly 11 more minutes. Grant Whitfield walked back on stage. His face was gray. He didn't even try to whisper this time. "Victor, we're done. The recursive layer is locked. None of our engineers can read the base notation. If we don't restore the system in the next 20 minutes, the live feed drops and we lose the Asian and European investor windows." Victor's jaw clenched. He looked at his engineers backstage, 6 of the highest-paid coders in Silicon Valley, sitting in front of their screens like students staring at an exam written in a language they'd never studied. Then he looked at Landon. The silence lasted 5 seconds. It felt like 5 hours. "Give him a laptop," Victor said quietly. Grant blinked. "What?" "I said give him a laptop. If this circus animal wants to play engineer, let him embarrass himself in front of the whole world." Grant hesitated, then signaled to a technician who carried a laptop to the edge of the stage. He set it on the table and stepped back like he was placing food in front of a stray dog. Landon didn't touch it. Instead, he reached into his jacket, the torn one, the one that smelled like the street, the one 12,000 people had been judging for the last 20 minutes, and pulled out a leather journal. Cracked spine, pages yellow with age, corners bent and stained with coffee. Victor laughed. "What is that? Your diary?" Landon didn't answer. He opened the journal to a page near the middle, ran his finger down a column of handwritten notation, then looked up at the frozen screen behind Victor. "Your team overwrote the primary recursive routing at Layer 9, Landon said. His voice was calm, technical. The voice of a man who had spent 10,000 hours inside the machine they were all staring at. "But the neural bridge doesn't route at Layer 9. It routes at Layer 6 through a nested loop structure that feeds back into itself before branching. Your engineers patched the surface. The Foundation rejected it." Grant Whitfield's mouth opened slightly. He looked at his team backstage. 2 of them were already nodding. Victor waved his hand. "Anybody can guess. That doesn't mean—" "The function name is NB6R, Landon continued, as if Victor hadn't spoken. "It calls a subprocess I wrote in 2020 called ARC-loop-7. That subprocess has a handshake sequence with the memory allocation layer that your team bypassed when they restructured. Without that handshake, the system builds, executes, and then collapses on itself every time it hits a recursive depth beyond 4. Dead silence. Not confused silence. Recognition silence. The kind that happens when someone in the room suddenly realizes they are standing next to the person who built the house they've been living in. Grant Whitfield took 1 step toward Landon. "How do you know the function names?" "Because I named them." Grant stared at him, then at the journal, then back at him. "Who are you?" Landon looked at Victor when he answered, looked him directly in the eyes. "I'm the man whose name you deleted." Victor's expression didn't change, but his hands did. His right hand gripped the edge of the podium so hard his knuckles turned white. His left hand, the one holding the mic, dropped 2 inches. The audience was quiet now. Not bored quiet, not confused quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a room full of people realizes the story they've been told might not be true. A journalist in the second row opened a new tab on her phone and typed, "Who is Landon Archer?" Landon turned back to the table. He didn't reach for the laptop. Instead, he picked up a napkin from the catering tray left on the edge of the stage and pulled a pen from his jacket pocket. The same borrowed pen he'd been carrying for 2 days. "I don't need your laptop," he said. "I just need this." And he started writing. Landon wrote on that napkin the way a surgeon cuts, fast, precise, and without hesitation. His pen moved in patterns no one on Victor's team had ever seen. Small, tight symbols, loops inside loops, arrows that curved back into themselves, lines of notation that looked more like music than code. Archer loops. The recursive shorthand he had invented at 19 years old in a public library, while the rest of the world was learning to use smartphones. The first napkin filled up in 40 seconds. He grabbed a second one, then a third. Grant Whitfield moved closer. He looked at the napkin, then at his laptop, then back at the napkin. His face changed. Not confusion. Recognition. The same notation that had been buried in Atlas's base code for 3 years, the notation his team couldn't read, was flowing from this man's hand like breathing. "That's the base layer," Grant whispered. Not to anyone, just to himself. Landon didn't look up. Hand me the system access. Grant glanced at Victor. Victor's arms were crossed. His jaw was tight. But he didn't say no. He couldn't. 22 minutes had passed since the crash. The European investor window closed in 18 minutes. 2 board members in the front row were already on their phones. Grant typed a command and turned the laptop screen toward Landon. The system's back end appeared. Thousands of lines of code, most of them red with error flags. Landon looked at the screen for exactly 6 seconds. Then he pointed at a block of code near the middle. There, lines 1144 through 1206. Your team rewrote my routing sequence but kept the original memory handshake. The system is trying to send data through a bridge that no longer connects to anything. It's like ripping out someone's spine and expecting them to walk. Grant scrolled to the lines. His eyes widened. That's exactly what we restructured last month. I know, Landon said, because the original structure is right here. He tapped the journal. Page 41, written March 2020, 2 years before you joined the company. Grant looked at the journal page, then at the screen. The match was undeniable. Victor stepped forward. This proves nothing. Any competent engineer could reverse engineer. Then why couldn't your 6 competent engineers fix it in the last 25 minutes? Landon said it without raising his voice, without turning around, without giving Victor the satisfaction of eye contact. The audience heard it. A few people in the middle rows sat up straighter. Someone let out a low whistle. Victor's face darkened. He grabbed Grant by the elbow and pulled him aside. The mic didn't catch the full conversation, but the people in the front row heard enough. This is my company, my launch. I don't care if he can fix it. I want him off my stage. Grant pulled his arm free. Victor, we have 16 minutes. He's the only one who knows what he's looking at. If you pull him off now, Atlas is dead. Not delayed. Dead. Victor stared at Grant for a long moment. Then he turned to the audience and smiled. The kind of smile that takes effort. Ladies and gentlemen, we're running a live diagnostic. Please bear with us. He didn't mention Landon. Didn't acknowledge him. Didn't say his name. As far as Victor was concerned, Landon was a tool, something to be used and discarded. Landon didn't care. He was already working. He pointed to the laptop and spoke to Grant. I need you to roll back the routing layer to the original architecture. Don't rewrite it, just restore it. The backup should still be in the system under a deprecated file labeled nb-core-original. Grant typed the command. A progress bar appeared. While that loads, Landon continued, take the napkin, 3rd one. See the loop sequence at the bottom? That's the handshake protocol your team broke. It needs to be re-entered manually, exactly as written. 1 character off and the bridge won't reconnect. Grant took the napkin. His hands were shaking. He squinted at Landon's handwriting. The Archer loops were dense, compact, layered, but they were legible. Every symbol was deliberate. I've never seen notation like this, Grant said. You wouldn't have. I invented it. Grant started entering the code, line by line, character by character. The room was silent except for the sound of keystrokes and 12,000 people holding their breath. Landon stood beside him. Not hovering, not anxious, just present, like a man standing in his own living room. Because in a way, that's exactly what this was. Every function, every layer, every loop in this system, he had built it in a studio apartment with recycled hardware and a dream that someone like Victor Hale eventually put his name on. 3 minutes passed. The progress bar hit 100%. The deprecated file loaded. Grant entered the last line from the napkin. His finger hovered over the enter key. He looked at Landon. Will this work? Landon nodded once. It's my code. It always worked. Grant pressed enter. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. The screen stayed dark. Victor, standing 10 feet away with his arms crossed, let out a short breath, almost a laugh. Then the screen flickered. The Atlas logo reappeared. The interface loaded. Data streams cascaded across the display. Clean, fast, organized. The system wasn't just running. It was running better than it had during any internal test. Because for the first time in 3 years, the original architecture was talking to itself again. Unblocked, unbroken, the way Landon had designed it. The audience didn't clap. Not yet. They were too stunned. Grant Whitfield stared at the screen. Then he turned to Landon with an expression that was equal parts admiration and horror. "You wrote this entire fix on napkins." Landon tucked the pen back into his jacket pocket. "I didn't write a fix. I just reminded the system who built it." And somewhere in the second row, the journalist who had searched Landon's name 20 minutes ago was now reading an archived article from 2020, a small tech blog that mentioned a co-founder departure from Meridian Systems. The co-founder's name had been redacted, but the article quoted one line from the original company filing. "Neural Bridge Architecture, Sole Inventor, L. Archer." She screenshotted it and hit send. The screen behind Victor Hale was alive. Atlas was running. The data streams flowed like rivers, finding their natural course. And 12,000 people were staring at a homeless man holding a napkin. Victor moved fast. He stepped back to the podium, grabbed the mic, and smiled at the audience like the last 30 minutes hadn't happened. "Ladies and gentlemen, Atlas is live." The crowd clapped. Cautiously at first, then louder. Victor soaked it in. He adjusted his tie. He straightened his posture. He was already rewriting the story in his head. A minor glitch, a dramatic recovery, a testament to his leadership under pressure. He didn't mention Landon. Not one word. "As I was saying," Victor continued, "this is what happens when you build a team that refuses to quit. My engineers identified the conflict and resolved it in real time. That's the Meridian difference." Landon stood at the edge of the stage, still holding his journal, still wearing the torn jacket. He watched Victor take credit for his work. Again. And for a moment, his expression didn't change. But Nora Collins had seen enough. She walked out from backstage, past 2 security guards, past Grant Whitfield, and straight to the journalist in the second row, the one who had already found the archived article. Nora leaned down and placed a USB drive on the journalist's notepad. "Everything's on there," Nora said quietly. "Original patent filings, board vote records, internal emails where Victor ordered Landon's name removed from every document. The archived code commits with timestamps proving Landon wrote the neural bridge 2 years before Victor claimed ownership." The journalist looked at the USB drive, then up at Nora. "Who are you?" "Someone who's tired of watching a thief give speeches." The journalist plugged the drive into her laptop. It took her less than a minute to open the first file, an internal Meridian email from Victor Hale to the legal department, dated 3 years ago. The subject line read, "Remove all references to L. Archer from patent documentation. Effective immediately." She opened the second file. A code repository log showing every commit to the Atlas neural bridge. Every single one authored by L. Archer between 2019 and 2022. After 2022, the author name changed to V. Hale. The code didn't change, just the name. She opened the third file. The original Meridian Systems Incorporation document. 2 founders listed. Victor Hale, Landon Archer, equal partners. Below it, the board resolution that removed Landon, 5 votes to 1. And a footnote that showed 4 of the 5 board members had been appointed by Victor in the 6 months before the vote. The journalist's hands were trembling, not from fear, from the kind of anger that comes when you realize you've been watching a con artist perform for years and never knew it. She stood up. "Mr. Hale." Victor paused mid-sentence. He looked down at her with the easy smile of a man who had never been challenged by a journalist he didn't own. "I have documents showing that the Atlas Neural Bridge was built entirely by a man named Landon Archer, the same man who just fixed your system on a napkin. I also have emails from your account ordering his name removed from all Meridian patents. Would you like to comment?" The room didn't gasp. It was worse than a gasp. It was silence. The kind of silence that falls when 12,000 people realize they've been clapping for the wrong man. Victor's smile held for exactly 2 seconds. Then it cracked. Those documents are taken out of context. Landon Archer was a contractor, a temporary hire. He contributed to early prototypes, nothing more. Landon's voice came from the side of the stage. Quiet, steady, carrying the weight of 3 years of silence. A contractor doesn't invent a notation system that your entire codebase runs on. A temporary hire doesn't write the function that just saved your launch. He held up the journal. Every page, every line, every loop, time-stamped, dated. In my handwriting, in a notation only I created. He looked at Victor. "You stole my work. You erased my name. You put me on the street. And just 20 minutes ago, you called me an animal in front of the world." He paused. "But animals don't write algorithms, Victor. And they don't save billion-dollar companies with napkins." The journalist was already typing. Her photographer was already shooting. And in the front row, 2 board members quietly closed their phones and stared at the floor. Victor opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came out. For the first time in 3 years, Victor Hale had nothing to sell. The next 4 hours were the longest of Landon Archer's life, and they had nothing to do with code. The journalist's name was Claire Dawson, Washington Post Technology Desk. Within 10 minutes of her question, her editor had flagged the story as breaking news. Within 20 minutes, 3 other outlets had picked up the thread. Within an hour, Landon Archer was trending on every platform in the country. But Victor Hale didn't become a billionaire by folding under pressure. He became a billionaire by fighting dirty. The Moscone Center emptied slowly after the launch. Most attendees left confused. They had come to see a product demo and instead witnessed something they couldn't quite name yet. The investors retreated to private rooms. The journalists retreated to their laptops. And Victor retreated to the 32nd floor of Meridian's headquarters on Market Street, where he assembled his legal team, his PR director, and 3 board members who still owed their seats to him. Landon was escorted out of the building by security 15 minutes after the reveal. No one stopped them. No one objected. Nora Collins tried to follow him, but a Meridian security officer blocked her path and told her she was suspended pending an internal review. She didn't argue. She had already given Claire Dawson everything that mattered. Landon stood on the sidewalk outside the Moscone Center, the same sidewalk where he had slept 2 nights earlier. He held his journal against his chest. A few people walking past recognized him from the live stream. One of them held up a phone and said, "That's the Napkin guy." Landon didn't respond. He walked 3 blocks to a bus stop, sat on the bench, and waited for nothing in particular. That's where Claire Dawson found him. She sat down next to him. No camera, no recorder. Just a notebook and a pen that probably cost less than the one Landon had borrowed 2 days earlier. "I need your side of the story," she said. "All of it." Landon looked at her. He had spent 3 years being invisible. 3 years where nobody asked him anything except, "Can you move?" and "Are you done with that bench?" Now a Washington Post journalist was sitting next to him asking for his truth. "Where do you want me to start?" he said. "The beginning." He told her everything. The library, the cracked laptop, the neural bridge prototype, meeting Victor, founding Meridian, the first year of building, 18-hour days, sleeping in the office, writing code until his fingers cramped. He told her about the day he realized his name was disappearing from documents, the confrontation with Victor, the board vote, the lawyer who took his money and delivered nothing, the eviction, the shelter, the overpass. He told her about the journal, how he never stopped writing, how even on the worst nights, the cold nights, the hungry nights, the nights when he thought about walking into traffic, he would open that journal and write one more function, one more loop, one more line of the architecture that still lived inside Atlas like a fingerprint Victor could never wash off. Claire wrote for 2 hours. Then she asked one final question. Why did you fix it? After everything he did to you, why did you save his launch? Landon was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I didn't save his launch. I saved my work. Atlas is my child. I don't care whose name is on the building. A father doesn't let his child die because someone else is raising it. Claire published the article at 9 p.m. that night. The headline read, The Homeless Man Who Saved a $1 Billion AI and the Billionaire Who Stole It From Him. By midnight, it had 4 million views. Victor's counterattack came at 6 a.m. the next morning. A prepared statement from Meridian's legal team, 14 paragraphs of carefully constructed denial. Landon Archer was described as a disgruntled former contractor with a history of mental instability. The statement claimed Landon had been terminated for erratic behavior and failure to meet performance benchmarks. It called the documents Nora provided fabricated or taken out of context, and it announced that Meridian Systems was pursuing legal action against both Nora Collins and Claire Dawson for theft of proprietary information and defamation. It was a nuclear response, designed to bury Landon before the public could decide who to believe. For 6 hours, it worked. The news cycle split. Half the headlines said, Homeless Genius Exposes Tech Fraud. The other half said, Billionaire CEO Fights Back Against Smear Campaign. Twitter became a battlefield. Reddit threads ran thousands of comments deep. Cable news panels debated whether Landon was a hero or a con artist. Landon watched none of it. He was sitting in the San Francisco Public Library, the same library where he had taught himself to code, reading the Meridian statement on a public computer. He read every line. Then he read it again. He didn't feel anger. He felt something worse. Familiarity. This was the same playbook Victor had used 3 years ago. Discredit, isolate, erase. It had worked once. Landon had lost everything. But this time there was a difference. This time, the code was public. Landon opened his journal to the last page, a page he had never shown anyone. Not Nora, not Claire, not even Victor during their years as partners. It was a single function, written in Archer loops, dated January 2019, 6 months before Meridian Systems was even incorporated. The function was called Genesis Arc. It was the seed. The first line of code that eventually became the neural bridge, the DNA of Atlas. And embedded in that function, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look, was a signature. Not a name, a mathematical signature, a self-referencing loop that produced a unique output when executed. The coordinates of the San Francisco Public Library. Latitude 37.7749. Longitude minus 122.4194. The place where it all began. Landon had written it as a private joke, a reminder to himself, a way of saying, no matter how big this gets, it started here, on this floor, on a cracked screen. He photographed the page. Then he called Claire Dawson. Run the Genesis ARC function in the Atlas source code. Check the output. Claire called a source at Meridian, a junior engineer sympathetic to Landon's story. The engineer ran the function. The output appeared on his screen. 37.7749 minus 122.4194. The coordinates of the San Francisco Public Library. Claire published the follow-up at 3 p.m. The headline was simpler this time. The proof was in the code all along. The article explained, in language anyone could understand, that Atlas contained a hidden mathematical signature that could only have been written by its original creator. The signature pointed to the exact location where Landon Archer first learned to code. It was embedded in the deepest layer of the system, a layer Victor's team had never touched because they didn't know it existed. The article included a side-by-side comparison. Landon's journal page, dated January 2019, and the Atlas source code, timestamped from the same month. The Archer loop's notation was identical. The function was identical. The signature was identical. No contractor wrote that. No temporary hire embedded a personal signature in the foundation of a system worth billions. Only someone who built it from the ground up, someone who loved it, would think to leave that kind of mark. Victor's legal team issued a second statement at 5 p.m. It was 4 paragraphs shorter than the first. The tone had changed. The word defamation was gone. The word review appeared 3 times. At 7 p.m., 2 Meridian board members released a joint statement calling for an independent investigation into the origins of the Atlas architecture. They did not mention Victor by name. They didn't need to. At 9 p.m., Nora Collins, still technically suspended, posted a single message on social media. No words. Just a photograph of the napkin Landon had written on that morning. 3 napkins, laid side by side, covered in Archer Loop's notation. Below the photograph, 1 hashtag. Hashtag Justice for Landon. By midnight, it had been shared 600,000 times. And Landon Archer, sitting on a bench outside the library where he had taught himself to code on a cracked laptop 20 years earlier, opened his journal, turned to a blank page, and started writing again. Because that's what builders do. They build. The independent investigation took 11 days. It felt like 11 years. A forensic technology firm out of Boston, no ties to Meridian, no ties to Victor, was hired to examine the Atlas source code, Landon's journal, and every internal document Nora Collins had provided. 3 senior analysts, 2 former patent attorneys, 1 retired federal judge overseeing the process. They didn't need 11 days. They had their answer in 3. The remaining 8 were spent making sure every conclusion was bulletproof, because they knew Victor's lawyers would challenge every comma. The findings were released on a Tuesday morning, 46 pages. The summary fit in 1 paragraph. The Atlas Neural Bridge architecture was conceived, designed, and built by Landon Archer between January 2019 and June 2022. All core functions, including the proprietary recursive notation system known as Archer loops, originated from Archer's personal work, predating the incorporation of Meridian systems. The subsequent removal of Archer's name from patent filings was conducted without legal basis and in direct violation of intellectual property co-ownership statutes. The board vote that terminated Archer's equity position was procedurally compromised, with 4 of 5 voting members appointed by Victor Hale within 6 months of the vote. Victor's legal team filed an objection within 2 hours. It was denied within 4. By that afternoon, 3 things happened in rapid succession. First, the Securities and Exchange Commission announced a preliminary inquiry into Meridian Systems for potential patent fraud and investor misrepresentation. Second, Meridian's stock dropped 41% in a single trading session, the largest single-day loss in the company's history. Third, Victor Hale was asked to step down as CEO by the remaining board members. He refused. They voted. This time, the vote was unanimous. Victor walked out of Meridian headquarters at 4:47 p.m., surrounded by lawyers and trailed by cameras. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He climbed into a black car and disappeared. And across the city, in a public library on Larkin Street, Landon Archer sat in the same chair where he had learned to code 20 years ago and read the findings on a public computer. He closed the journal, pressed his palm flat against the cover, and for the first time in 3 years, he breathed. The weeks that followed changed everything, and nothing. Landon Archer didn't hold a press conference, didn't hire a publicist, didn't post a single word on social media. The world was screaming his name, and he let it scream. Claire Dawson's original article had passed 30 million views. The follow-up, "The proof was in the code all along," had been translated into 14 languages. Documentary crews from 3 streaming platforms were already in pre-production. A literary agent called the San Francisco Public Library's front desk and asked them to pass along a message about a book deal. The librarian, a woman named Dorothy, who had watched Landon sit on her floor as a teenager with a cracked laptop, pinned the message to the bulletin board and wrote underneath it, "Landon, call this woman. She seems serious." Landon called her. Then he called a lawyer, a real one this time, not a desperate hire with empty promises, but a former federal prosecutor named Audrey Sloan, who had spent 15 years dismantling corporate fraud. She took the case pro bono. When a reporter asked her why, she said, "Because I've never seen a cleaner case of theft in my career. And because someone should have taken this case 3 years ago." The lawsuit was filed on a Wednesday. Archer versus Meridian Systems. The claims: intellectual property theft, fraudulent patent reassignment, wrongful termination of equity, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The damages sought were not disclosed publicly. Legal analysts estimated somewhere between $200 million and $500 million. Meridian's new interim CEO, a woman named Patricia Good, who had joined the board only 8 months earlier, released a statement within 24 hours. It was 3 sentences long. Meridian Systems acknowledges the findings of the independent investigation. We are committed to a full and transparent resolution. We have reached out to Mr. Archer's legal team to begin settlement discussions. No denial, no spin, no 14 paragraphs of corporate deflection. Just 3 sentences that said what Victor Hale never could. We were wrong. The settlement came 5 weeks later. The exact number was sealed, but the terms that were made public told the story clearly enough. Landon Archer's name was restored to every patent he had authored. His co-founder status was officially reinstated in Meridian's corporate records. He received a permanent equity stake in the company and a seat on the board of directors, not as a gesture, but as a legal correction of what should never have been taken. Nora Collins was reinstated at Meridian with a formal apology and a promotion to Vice President of Systems Architecture. When a reporter asked her how it felt, she said, "It feels like the adults finally showed up." Grant Whitfield resigned quietly. Not in disgrace, in shame. He told a colleague that he had suspected the truth about Atlas for over a year, but never said anything. "I told myself it wasn't my fight," he said. "That's the kind of lie that lets you sleep at night and hate yourself in the morning." Victor Hale disappeared from public life. His social media accounts went dark. His Pacific Heights home was listed for sale 6 weeks after his removal. Former associates said he was consulting lawyers about the SEC inquiry, which had expanded into a full investigation. No charges had been filed yet, but the word "yet" carried weight. The napkin, the original napkin, the one Landon had written on during the launch, ended up in a glass frame on the wall of the San Francisco Public Library, donated by Landon himself. Below it, a small plaque read, "Started on this floor, came back to this floor. The building doesn't matter. The mind does. L. Archer." And every morning, Dorothy the librarian dusted the frame and told the same thing to every kid who asked about it. That man learned to code right where you're standing, So sit down, open your laptop, and get to work. This story was never about technology. It was never about algorithms or napkins or billion-dollar launches. It was about what happens when the world decides who you are before you open your mouth. Landon Archer walked into that building with nothing. No suit, no title, no money, no power. He had torn clothes and unlaced boots and a leather journal full of brilliance that nobody wanted to see. Because the man carrying it didn't look like what Silicon Valley expected a genius to look like. 12,000 people watched him get called a monkey, a dog, a cockroach, an animal, and not one of them stood up. Not one of them said, "Wait, let him speak." Because the world has a habit of measuring people by what they wear, where they sleep, and the color of their skin, instead of what they carry inside their minds. Victor Hale didn't steal Landon's work because Landon was weak. He stole it because the world made it easy. Because a black man from Hunter's Point with no connections and no money is the easiest person in America to erase. You take his name off the paperwork. You push him out of the room. You wait for the world to forget. And it does. It almost always does. But Landon didn't forget. He carried every line of code in a journal pressed against his chest through 3 years of shelters and overpasses and cold nights. He didn't carry it for revenge. He carried it because it was his. Because no board vote, no stolen patent, no amount of humiliation can take away what your mind built. That napkin didn't just fix a system. It reminded the world that talent doesn't care about your address. Genius doesn't check your bank account. And the truth, no matter how long you bury it, always finds its way to the surface. If you're out there right now, overlooked, underestimated, written off by people who never bothered to ask what you're capable of, remember Landon Archer. Remember the napkin. Remember that the man who built a billion-dollar system on a library floor is the same man who saved it on a stage where nobody thought he belonged. Your work is yours. No one can erase it. Not if you refuse to let them. If this story moved you, if it made you think even for a moment about the people the world overlooks, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me about a time you were underestimated. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because stories like these don't just entertain, they remind us who we really are. Hashtag Justice for Landon. Hashtag Napkin Genius. Hashtag True Story of Atlas.
3 napkins and a bottle of paint that all it took to prove the man they call an animal was the only one who could save a billion-dollar system. But still what stayed with me is not the code, it's a journal. 3 years on the street, and every night Landon opened that journal and kept writing, not for revenge, because it was his. No board vote, no stolen patent, no billionaire on stage can race inside your mind and take what you will there. Victor erased Landon's name from everything, took his equity, took his home, called himself the genius, but the cost doesn't lie. And the moment that system crashed, the truth didn't need a press release, it needed a napkin. So let me ask you this: if the world erased your name from everything you ever built, would you still keep building? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story hit you, say it with someone who been scouted out. Hit subscribe, click once, just as real. Your work is yours. No one can erase it, not if you refuse to let them.